Would they view you as being kind, compassionate, loving? Or would someone look at you and say, no, that person, he's more rule-oriented. He's unapproachable and unfriendly. Well, how did people view Jesus? Was Jesus rule-oriented, unapproachable, unfriendly? Absolutely not. We know how everyone viewed Jesus. We all know he was compassionate and loving toward everyone. But let's look at a specific account so we can see how to follow his example and how we can apply it into our lives. This account is at Mark 3, 1 and 2. And this says, once again he entered into a synagogue, and a man with a withered hand was there. So they were watching him closely to see whether he would cure the man on the Sabbath in order to accuse him. So these verses right here, these lay the foundation for this whole account that we'll be reading. So here, there's this man that needed help. He had a withered hand, and Jesus, he had the ability to cure him. But notice what the religious leaders said, or what they were doing. They were looking closely at Jesus, not at the man with the withered hand. So their interest was on Jesus to see if Jesus was going to heal him, to see if Jesus was going to follow the letter of the law, so they could accuse him and get him in trouble. So these religious leaders, they had no compassion whatsoever toward this man. You see, Jesus already knew about their unreasonable thinking, and he was well aware of their unscriptural view of what it meant to work on the Sabbath. And he had already faced ridicule previously before. But now, Jesus is going to confront this issue. And let's see how he does it this time at Mark 3, 3 and 4. And it says, next he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to kill? But they kept silent. So by reading these scriptures, it is so evident that Jesus was not afraid of these men. He was willing to face persecution and ridicule just to help this man with the withered hand. And he easily could have just waited till the next day to help him. But Jesus wanted to help this man and show compassion, because Jesus knew that one of the most important things he could be doing here on earth was showing compassion. Well, let's look at our picture now that we have, our first picture. What do we see here? Well, if you look closely in the back, we can see the religious leaders. Are they looking joyous or happy that this man's getting healed? Absolutely not. They look mad or angry or thinking, why would Jesus be doing such a thing? And then if you look at Jesus, where is he doing this at? Is he staying hidden? Is he trying to cover the man's hand? No, he's out in front of everyone. He even told the man, come to the center. So Jesus felt this real compassion for this man and truly wanted to help him. And he stood up to the Jewish religious leaders. So now, let's keep on following this account, and let's look at verse 5. And verse 5 says, after looking around at them with indignation, being thoroughly grieved at the insensibility of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So as we're reading this, what emotion do we feel from Jesus? Well, as we read here, it said that Jesus looked at them with indignation and was thoroughly grieved at the insensibility of their hearts. But why would Jesus feel this way? Well, I would just like to share one definition of insensibility with you guys. It says, the insensibility is a lack of awareness or concern. So obviously, from reading this account, we can clearly see the religious leaders' lack of awareness or concern for this man with a withered hand. The Sabbath was supposed to be a sacred day dedicated for rest, but the religious leaders made the Sabbath burdensome by adding unreasonable rules and restrictions. The law on healing was healing was forbidden on the Sabbath unless it was life-threatening. So if you had a cut or a sprained arm, you were not allowed to heal it. So technically, Jesus healing the man with the withered hand was not allowed. These religious leaders, they were never too fond of Jesus. They never liked him. So clearly, they were making these unreasonable rules just to catch Jesus and try to accuse him. So we can see here once again that these religious leaders had no compassion or love toward anyone. So their hearts were clearly insensible. Just as Jesus had stated before, their main focus was trying to accuse Jesus. Well, let's look at our second picture. what can we see here? We see a mother with her maybe having a rough day at work, probably working long hours, a stressful job, trying to provide for her family. We don't really see a husband in there. And then maybe her son had a rough day at work or at school, and he's might be giving her a hard time about going to the meetings. And that could have made them late to the meetings, and this could have been a reoccurring habit. But look at the bottom half of the picture. What do we see? We see these two smiling elders giving them counsel and advice from the Young People Ask book. What are the two main differences on this picture and the last picture? Well, it's the love and compassion that's being shown. Well, if you remember on the first picture, their faces, you don't need to go back to the other one. We see their faces, they were mean, they weren't looking happy. But on the second picture, the elders were showing love and compassion to that mother and her son because they wanted to help them. So how can we make a personal application to ourselves, for this to ourselves? Well, you might be thinking, you'll never be healing anyone. Or maybe you're thinking, you're also not an elder, so how can you give loving counsel? Well, let's take, for example, you know the meeting times start at 7 o'clock, and that was a set arrangement for our congregation. And you know we should even get there on time. And we even had publications about being punctual. So Tuesday night comes around, you're getting ready, you're feeling good about yourself because you got dressed on time, you ate dinner on time, you're gonna be 20 minutes early to the meeting. And if you're anything like me, being 20 minutes early is a pretty big deal. So as you're getting into the car, you get a phone call from an elderly sister all the way across town, and she says she needs a ride to the meeting. Well, and if you take her to the meeting, it's gonna make you late to the meeting. What would you do? Well, yes, the set rule is that the meeting starts at 7, but what is the loving thing to do? So again, we need to ask ourselves, are we rule-oriented, or do we show love and compassion to all of those in our congregation? So what is the contrast that we see between Jesus and the religious leaders? Yes, it is so obvious that Jesus was always showing love and compassion to everyone he was around. While these religious leaders, they never showed love. And they never showed that real love that Jesus had. So let us always follow Jesus' example of never putting limits on our love and compassion to everyone in the congregation.